Here we go. Okay. Here's our friend, Miss Katie Pay Smiles is not really her name, but Katie Pay Smiles, doctor, PhD. She's an associate professor and the director of the Advanced Certificates in Reading Science at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, which is CUNYQD. Dr. Miles is the author of Reading Ready and the academic advisor for Reading Go. She is the co-author and Reading Ready for Whole Phonics and the forthcoming book, Making Words Stick. One of my favorites. I love it. I should have found it. It's right here somewhere. Dr. Miles is the co-founder and principal investor of CUNY Reading Corps, which provides pre-service teacher training and provides free high dosage tutoring to over 2,300 historically underserved New York City students per year. Dr. Miles is also the founder and president of the Reading Institute, which brings free evidence-based tutoring programs to striving readers across the country and provides reading science-aligned professional development to teachers. So welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here. And I forgot to really quickly just tell who we are. So we are the Reading League of Utah. We are about a year old, just a little over a year. So our mission is really to advance the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading instruction. It's so, so, so critical and so important for our future, for our students, for everyone. Our vision is that all educators who teach students to read will use evidence-aligned practices, resulting in successful reading outcomes for their learners. And we have members, those of you that are here, thank you so much for joining us. We have teachers, instructional coaches, higher education faculty, pre-service teachers, and administrators. And just really quickly, my son is dyslexic. And so that is what kind of got me on this journey of the science of reading and how do we help all students. And he was one. We were one of the top schools in Utah, so we had like 90% of our kids were on pathways and proficiency. Like we were so on the mark. And it wasn't until my kid came along and didn't know how to read and I didn't know how to help him that I was like, oh, I actually don't know how to teach all kids. I don't know how to teach kids who struggle. And I think we had a lot of kids who are going to tutoring and things like that. And this is the magic. Orthographic mapping is the magic for him. That's how I got him reading. He just got a 5 on his AP exam in high school last year in ninth grade. And I was just so
Wow.
excited. I was like, yes, this works. It's so magical. So thank you so much for coming. I love your book. Like I seriously
Uh,
sat down and read the whole thing because it was so good. So thank you. Thank you for coming. We're so grateful to have you here and sharing your knowledge with us. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I
oh,
will let you start sharing.
Lori, that's a very powerful story. Very powerful. I've heard it from a lot of educators who are also parents of children with dyslexia. So thank you for sharing that. And, it's why those of us who do what we do, I have two kids too. And, if that was ever the case, my gosh, to come to this and to find the resources that you need to help your own child and then for it to transform your career is just remarkable. It's remarkable. And thanks for all you do. I know you're doing huge work in Utah with teacher preparation. So we were just talking about that before. So it's great to be here. Hi, everyone. As Lori said, I'm Katie. I'm so happy to be here. I am a professor, and my research kind of spun out into two different projects. One within the university that Lori mentioned called CUNY Reading Corps, where we serve as many students in the New York City public school system with explicit systematic tutoring, high impact tutoring as possible each school year by training pre-service teachers in Reading Ready or Reading Go, programs that I wrote or I have rewritten and advised on. And then that work spun out into the Reading Institute, which now partners with over 34 universities across the country to make sure that professors have access to these free structured literacy programs that are at the nonprofit so that they can use them with their pre-service teachers. And it all comes down to, for me, orthographic mapping. And that's why my colleague Molly Ness and I wrote this book. And I always start with giving credit where credit is due, which is to my mentor, Dr. Linnea Airy. She wrote this endorsement of the book really, I should have a picture. In some other talks I give, I put a picture of me and Linnea. I went and did my PhD. I sought out Dr. Airy to do my PhD with her because I was a reading specialist and I was obsessed with the fact that I could use the same instructional approach and it would work for some students and it didn't work at all for other students. I had been a classroom teacher, then a reading specialist, and I could not, I was constantly doing what I now know is called action research. I was doing it. I could not believe that I didn't really understand how to teach all children, just like Lori, how to read. And even when I was a reading specialist, I didn't know how to do it. And so I left the field of education, in fact, and went into psychology. So I went into educational psychology, and my PhD is in ed psychology with a focus on cognitive development on the acquisition of reading, which is Linnea Airy's specialty. So Linnea Airy is a educational psychologist, really an experimental psychologist. This is her theory, and she has two theories that I'm going to get to tonight. So we'll kind of take a step back and just think about ourselves as readers. So do you all know that the average skilled adult reader has between 30 and 70,000 words that they can read instantly and effortlessly? How did all of those words get there? That's really what we need to consider. Like you all on this call and anyone listening to the recording, you're on the 70,000 word platform. You're way up there. You didn't actually do something with each and every word. But somewhere along the way, you had to build up some word reading habits, some word storage habits that could then work exponentially for you. So, my colleague Molly uses this example often. As a proficient reader, one summer she was reading this book. And in the book, it said, she looked down at the freshly piled sand beside her, then out of the fog, blanketing the, and she stopped. She said, wait a second. Molly's a PhD. She reads a lot. She's like, I have no idea what this word is. I've never seen it before. Well, the process of orthographic mapping actually comes into play for those of us, all of us who are proficient readers at the 70,000 word mark, even into adulthood. The reason Molly stopped is because the letters OUGH in English can be pronounced at least 7 different ways. You see that on the screen here. It's almost laughable. It's like, okay, so it could rhyme with any one of these. Well, that word is actually the word slough. Slough is a swamp. However, because it's English, and let's throw another curveball in there, there's actually a different pronunciation of this word that rhymes with rough, so slough, when it is a verb. And so Molly had every reason in the world to stop there. But what Molly didn't do, she did not skip that word. She did not guess the word. She stopped and did her proficient reader analysis of that word, which meant that she went to the online dictionary. While looking at the word, she listened to the pronunciation of the word on the little speaker icon, and then she got the meaning of the word. And only then was she satisfied. Well, what Molly was doing was she was activating what is widely known as the reading brain. This is an incredible coordination of all of these different parts of the brain that you actually do not need to memorize at any point in your career. If you want to, that's great. But what you need to know is that there are specific types of the brain that are leveraged, that are utilized in order to read and spell and write and do all and comprehend and do all of the activities that comprise literacy. When it comes to orthographic mapping, things that we want to think about are that while all of those parts of the brain are involved in reading, the multicolored brain that I showed before, the goal is to create the most efficient pathway for word reading and spelling. The dorsal pathway, the northern pathway, focuses on phonological decoding. That is when you're linking symbols to sounds. Very important. We must travel on that pathway. However, the ventral pathway, the southern pathway, that's what handles fast automatic word recognition. So think ventral, very quick, automatic, efficient. what we know about the reading brain is that we have to be on the dorsal pathway for a bit of time before we are able to travel down the ventral pathway. It's when we have stored words in long-term memory that we can move efficiently down the ventral pathway. And that's where the theory of orthographic mapping comes in. So, what does this refer to? Well, it's a cognitive process that enables words to be securely stored in long-term memory so that they can be automatically retrieved by sight. Once you have a large corpus of words that have been securely stored, you can cruise down that ventral pathway much more frequently than you were previously. And that's what enables that fluent reading. Another way to think about this process, this cognitive process that I just defined, is to consider what happens with emergent readers when they come upon a word that they don't know how to read automatically. Well, they first see the word and they connect that word they make connections between the letters and the sounds that they make. They don't do that automatically. This is laborious. They're going p, I, g. And I added a to the piece. Let me do it again. I, g, very precise. They segmented it and then they're blending it together. Pig, pig. Well, they can get to pig a lot faster if they have the meaning of that word, if they have an oral representation of that word in memory. They're like, oh yeah, pig. Well, they can connect that to what they know about the animal. Ari has approved me, gives her blessing, however you want to say it, for me to use her original diagram of the theory of orthographic mapping. And I always like to use it when I can. This theory is based on decades of rigorous experimental research that was conducted by Dr. Ari and fleets of colleagues, both in the US and internationally. And the theory has held up time and time again across rigorous experiments and across languages. I am going to give one academic emphasis here. So Ari explains that there's a glue between the spelling of the word and the pronunciation that then also attaches to the meaning. So again, this is a cognitive process in which the reader is going to, and I'm going to use the more technical terms, connect the graphemes, which are the spellings, to the phonemes, which are the pronunciations, to the meanings. Now, with the meaning, the spelling and pronunciation is the within word connection. The meaning is the associative connection. That semantic associative learning, that is happening outside of the word. You can't define the word pig by using the word pig. You have to associate the word pig with other words. Okay, so you've got the within word connection, spelling to pronunciation, and the associative or the outside of the word connection, which is the meaning. When all of this occurs, an amalgam or a representation of the word is formed. And over time, that amalgam of the spelling, pronunciation, meaning is clarified, strengthened, and more securely stored in long-term memory so that when you see the word, you automatically say it. I always pause here though. What we've learned from other cognitive researchers, Stan Lestane is the one that always comes to mind, is that even when you are automatically reading a word, you are still parallel processing all of the letters in the word. And that's how you know the word is stop instead of stamp or whatever, some close bid instead of bed. You're always looking and processing those letters. So in the book, Making Words Stick, with Dr. Ari's blessing, we created this diagram, just a simplified version, where the spelling and pronunciation are stacked on top of each other so that we can represent this imperative connection within the word. And then we drew the arrow to meaning, which is the associative learning. And then together, the within word connection and the associative meaning connection support the long-term storage. Just to clarify before we move forward, this is a cognitive process. So even in this book, and we'll get to we'll get to it in a second. We do have all of these activities in the book. Those activities are not. It's a bit of a technicality here. They're not. You're not orthographically mapping. You are facilitating the cognitive process of storing those words in memory. Okay, that is important. Also, two other clarifications that Ari made recently. So while the focus originally in the theory was on graphophonemic connections, the graphemes to the phonemes, she also acknowledges, and really has always acknowledged, but really brought this to light more recently, which is that there's also morphographemic connections and analysis of words taking place. So as words become multisyllabic and you become a more proficient reader, you are moving away from those graphemes and you're able to utilize the morphemic or the syllabic chunks in words. But you're also always going down to the grapheme level for accuracy, both in word reading and spelling. She also clarifies the connection to meanings, syntactic and semantic, strengthens and clarifies the storage in words. So there was a little bit, and I'm not online, but there was some online stuff happening around, oh, orthographic mapping is just spelling to pronunciation. No, there's been lots of studies. Meaning does play a role in all of this. And so I just included this. Some people like to take a screenshot or whatnot of Ari's exact words around this clarification. And then just a reminder of how morphemes come into play, even in the most basic, or even in the early childhood years of learning how to read, how we can leverage morphology. Okay, so when does this cognitive process of orthographically mapping words happen? Well, what I love about Ari is she does not shy away. It happens in a multitude of ways. It starts once letter sound or grapheme phoneme correspondences are well known or known well. Okay, so think about those students in kindergarten. They've really laid some foundational skills. They have those skills established with some letters and sounds. As soon as a group of letters and sounds are known, you can start decoding words. So words can go into long-term storage when you're decoding them. Also, when you're studying them, this could be more like a spelling task or a word analysis task. Think of decoding as like you're in context and you're stopping to decode the word. Think of study as more of isolated word analysis work or activities that are happening in the classroom. And then Aries says, even when students are simply looking at the spelling of a word and they hear the way the word is pronounced, the word can be stored in memory, long-term memory. I work overwhelmingly with striving readers, and I always say striving when I can instead of struggling. Many of the students that I work with in the New York City public school system are individuals with dyslexia who have not received a diagnosis, may never receive a diagnosis. For these students, just looking at the word, hearing it, is often not going to be what puts that word in long-term memory. They're going to need many repetitions. And so, but what I always appreciate about areas, many of us who've taught, we have worked with students for whom they see it and hear it once or twice, and good for those kiddos. That word is in memory. I mentioned repetitions because I include this slide and really like to drive home this point about how many exposures are needed. Learners vary in the amount of exposures and type of exposures they need to securely store these words. An important thing to note from the field of reading science is that research shows that the number of exposures that students need to learn, which in experiments that we run, learning means that they are retrieving the pronunciation or spelling the word. That's typically what we mean learn when we run our studies. That learning depends on the experiment that was conducted, the grade and age of the student, and the profile of the learner. And I show these 4 studies. There are thousands that I could pull out, but these 4 just give you this example of like, okay, the study was only conducted on 7 and 8-year-olds. There was a limited amount of time. They only conducted the study over the course of 2 weeks, and they found these results, 4 to 6 exposures for 7 to 8-year-olds in the first study. There was a study with Aryan Salt March where they were able to figure out that with this group of first graders, the higher performing first graders only needed 4.4 exposures versus another group of students that needed 9.3 exposures. Now, that was in a highly controlled environment, highly controlled. Imagine if it's in the wild in a first grade classroom, right? The students who needed 9.9, maybe they actually needed 21 exposures. We don't know, right? Okay, and so I always like to show this also because there's been this if you've heard me give talks, I kind of call out this statistic that floats around our field that says students need 200. Some students need 200 exposures. Well, it could be that some students need 200 exposures. I have tried to find the original source of that study. It's cited in a book that Moats wrote, but I can't find the original source. And so I just want to say is reading, if we're all embracing reading science, we have to embrace also the messiness and the uncertainty sometimes if we don't actually know the exact amount. And we have to be careful with what we're saying. Okay, so off my little researcher soapbox, and now I'm going to go back to why is this essential? Well, storing words in long-term memory means that you can recognize words instantly by sight. You see it, you can say it. That leads to fluent reading. And a shout out to Jan Hasbrook. I know many of you know her. She wrote the foreword for this book, and she is the guru on fluency. And she really, years ago, embraced like we can't get to fluent reading unless we have a large corpus of words that have been stored. All right, so once you can read fluently, this means that more mental energy is available for making meaning from text, which just means you have more energy to comprehend. The concept of automaticity, and I know there's a lot on this. I just, again, put it here because some people like to want the original source. The concept of automaticity or automatic word recognition has been around a long time in the field. More recently, the term decoding threshold has been used. This is the notion that if students don't attain a critical level of decoding skills, their reading comprehension suffers because they continue to divert too much energy to decoding. And there is a wonderful study and a very insightful study from Dr. Barbara Foreman and her colleagues from the Florida Center of Reading Research that supports the decoding threshold. This study was so important because it included close to 3,000 students from 18 schools in 2 large school districts in Florida, spanning grades 1st to 10th grade. And across those grades, the combined decoding plus language model explain, and by model we mean statistical model. So the combined model where they had the students decoding scores and their language, their what do they call it? Their decoding and language score there. That explained a very large proportion of variance in reading comprehension. So the variance actually ranged from 68 to 99% of the variance in the students' reading comprehension. So when you looked at the students' decoding plus their language skills, that is what was explaining their reading comprehension scores. That is just incredible. And it shows this dynamic interplay of your oral language mixed with your decoding skills. The two things that we get off and in early childhood, that's what we're here to do, right? We're building up oral language and we're trying to get at all students up and going with their decoding skills. That by 10th grade is explaining 99% of the variance in comprehension. We have a very, very important role to play as reading specialists or reading teachers in the early years. So I also show this to explain, well, if students are having trouble with comprehension, this can explain what's going on. So this is the self-perpetuating cycle of reading difficulties. And I'm sorry I'm not giving credit. I think this is actually from 95% group, and I'm sorry I didn't put it on this slide. I have it on my other slide. It starts in the top right where it's foundational skills deficit. This is founded in research that when students have that foundational skills deficit, it leads to difficulty with phonic decoding, which is otherwise known as decoding. That leads to diminished ability to orthographically map words, which is the reverse of what I just showed you. Then you're having trouble with fluency. You're avoiding reading. When you avoid reading, you have less practice with reading. And then it's that slippery slope of less practice leads to less academic, less vocabulary, oral language, and reduced comprehension or just content knowledge overall. So again, this starts way back at the top. You see where orthographic mapping is fueled by your foundational skills. And then your ability to cognitively map words into long-term memory is the catalyst or the catapult to actually have that content knowledge and all of those comprehension skills you need later on. So Aries' theory of orthographic mapping is beautifully explained by her second theory of phases of word reading and spelling. So she's got two prominent phases in the field. These developmental phases have been supported also by several experimental studies. Aries writes about them extensively, but I'm just going to give you a bit of a drive-by here, and they're explained quite thoroughly in the book. The first phase is the pre-alphabetic, where students are pre-readers. They are using the visual, non-alphabetic connections in their environment to read words. This is like reading your environment, right? They see the sign, they say McDonald's, and you don't want to pop the proud parents bubble, but the child is not actually reading McDonald's, right? They just know that those are the golden arches. The second phase is the partial alphabetic, which is exactly as it sounds. Young children are using partial letter sound connections. They are often the most salient sounds. So if they go to write the word McDonald's, they would typically write an M and a D, often the beginning sound and a prominent middle or ending sound. They would also attempt to read the word and they might leverage that first sound. We then get into the full alphabetic phase where there are more complete letter sound or grapheme phoneme connections within the words. This was a spelling that I saw of McDonald's that a student had made, and I just love it so much because every sound, every phoneme in McDonald's is represented here. It is a brilliant spelling of McDonald's. It's phonetically plausible. It's a great representation of the full alphabetic phase. And in the full alphabetic phase, students are reading accurately. They're just not reading automatically, but they are able to phonically decode many words that they are coming across. It's when students are in the consolidated phase that they have become more fluent word readers because they have so many words stored, and they're moving on into multisyllabic word reading where they are unitizing parts of the word. They're able to use those more sophisticated phonetic elements like IGH. They're able to use syllables, affixes, and that is what gets them to the ability to accurately read and accurately spell a word such as McDonald's. So I like to use, I have two kiddos, one in first grade, one in fourth grade. And this is my daughter. She's in fourth grade now, but these are some of her spellings. So when she was young, she wrote this and she told me it was the word park. I was like, oh, this is perfect pre-alphabetic. So she was writing using random pseudo or memorized letters that were not connected to sounds. You don't see a P anywhere in there, yet that is the word park. It was absolutely wonderful. Here's an example of her writing the word sorry. And we're not going to point out the backwards S. All good. She was very young when she wrote this. This is a fabulous representation of the word sorry and more advanced than what I showed you with McDonald's. So that's the other thing. There are progressions even within these phases. She was able to write the partial letter sound representations, but she is missing a sound in there. So another great example is writing the word car with a K and an R. Here is her full alphabetic representation of the word daddy. And I always crack, this is make the joke, this is a great spelling of the word daddy and not a bad representation of my husband in that delightful picture. So here students are able to invent more complete letter sound spellings of words, and they know the major grapheme phoneme correspondences. So even the fact that she knew to add an E there for the Y sound, right? She hears daddy, and she's adding the E. She's got an absolutely plausible representation there. And here is her representation of the word love. And again, I had previously mentioned that this is the multisyllabic word. This is when you're moving into more multisyllabic and unitized elements of words, but it also, the consolidated phase can also be represented by single syllable words like the word love. And I often stop here to say, my daughter was not that far apart in age when she wrote all of these spellings. And this is a great example of while Georgie was able to write the word love in the consolidated phase, she was not in the consolidated phase. In fact, when she wrote all four of these, she was actually at the tail end of the partial alphabetic phase. So she had a few words that she could represent in the full alphabetic and some very common words like mom, love, her name, she could write in the consolidated form. Airy intentionally used the word phases and not stages. Phases acknowledges that there is overlap. These are like waves that are overlapping. And you might have some words that are here, but the majority and what it cycles back to is the majority or the predominant phase is where the student is. And the instruction that that child needs to meet the needs of that phase. And the instruction needed at each phase is different. Just like every student needs a differentiated form of instruction, the phases are differentiated by instructional need. So I showed you single spellings, but this comes up in student writing. So we're going to look at these writing samples. You see here, oh, these are Molly's daughter, Callie. We've got the pre-alphabetic writing where you see the random scribbling there, which is fantastic. You see the partial alphabetic, which says, I rode my scooter. A very good partial alphabetic representation there. On the way into full alphabetic, just a few sounds that are missing to get to that full alphabetic. Every sound is represented phase. That one was just so great. And then we stop at the full alphabetic. And I think we have, yes, we're going to do this together. If you don't mind unmuting, you haven't seen this writing before, the one on the left, the full alphabetic, and we're going to read this together. Let's see if we can read it together. If we can read it, it shows that almost all of the sounds have been represented. Okay, let's begin. The first,
Oh,
yeah,
first.
yeah, that's it.
Okay.
First, I'll give you that one. The first
Game was about to begin.
Very
The
good, Lori.
game, you have to just go. The
Go
game
for it.
began. The players
Great.
chase the ball after it won.
After
After
you win.
you win. Okay.
That's right. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have ended it with after you win. That's right.
That's awesome.
Wasn't that great? So, Laura, you've
Yeah.
never seen it before. I totally put you on the spot. Great job. And because Lori could read that, and if we did an analysis of this, in over that many words, the percentage of full representations in the words is extremely high. And that tells us, okay, this student is solidly in the full alphabetic phase. And we're not going to read the consolidated. It's just a nice piece of writing where almost all of the words are spelled accurately. So I use this with my grad students, often with my advanced certificate students, to show the overlay of these two theories of Aries. So we have phase on the left, and we have the phonetic representation or the predominant representation, I'm sorry, next to it. And I had previously showed you Aries diagram with the arrows. Let's look at the first phase, the pre-alphabetic phase. There are no mappings. I didn't even put the diagram in that box because orthographic mapping is not happening in the pre-alphabetic phase. As students progress into the partial alphabetic phase, you see that I intentionally put two arrows. So you have a word that has four phonemes that need to be represented. Two of them are represented. That's fantastic. Partial alphabetic. Full alphabetic, you'll see that I intentionally put four arrows, but one of those arrows is gray. It's a misrepresentation, but it is a plausible representation. That would be our full. And then consolidated, you see all red, right? So it's accurate. Again, Aries phases, those phases that we just talked about, are for both word reading and spelling. You will likely see the relationship between these skills and practice, and research shows that they are very highly correlated. Airy uses the metaphor of two sides of the same coin because they rely on the same linguistic skills. Importantly, spelling is harder because it involves phonological memory, and you have to, the letters aren't given to you. You have to retrieve all, you first have to figure out, well, what are all the ways that the long A sound can be represented? Now, which would be the accurate representation in this word rain? Okay. Again, the reading and spelling are very highly correlated. Pan and colleagues did a meta-analysis more recently, which found that the correlation ranged across studies from 0.53 to I think it was like 0.93 or 0.94. It is one of the highest correlations in the social behavioral sciences. It's just incredible. In the book, though, I included this rubber band example. Again, I use this with my grad students over at the university because so many of my students are reading specialists. They say, what about those students for whom reading and spelling really aren't that highly correlated? Remember, these correlations are over large samples, right? But those of us who work with those striving readers, they may not fall within those ranges. Their skills may not be as highly correlated. Well, I use a rubber band as the example. I say, take a rubber band and drop it on the table. In its relaxed form, reading and spelling should be on either side of it. You can give reading the side to the right, like it's going to progress a little bit ahead of spelling. Problems come into play when the tension builds. There can be a bit of tension, but if that tension builds to the point where the rubber band is about to snap, or it's uncomfortable to hold it, an intervention is needed. And that intervention needs to focus on spelling. And there aren't enough spelling interventions that exist. Spelling is so reliant on your orthographic memory. It is reliant on your orthographic memory. And the term mental orthographic images, MOIs, that's exactly what this is. And that is absolutely like orthographic mapping. Some students can read words automatically, but they are not retaining that spelling. And that requires more practice more practice spelling that word in isolation, in context, more word study activities. And a lot of what we do in the book actually kind of drills down on that. So people often think of us as like word reading. This is like orthographic mapping is all about word reading. It is equally as much about spelling. All right, so next up, we're going to just take a quick look. Oh, we don't have. I want to get to the four parts. So I just want to show you this. Actually, we would have done this analysis, but this is a fifth grader that Molly was working with, where this tension had built. So this student was given the test of written language, or the TOWEL 4, and within that assessment, there's the developmental spelling assessment, or the DSA. Molly tested her, and this spelling test starts on this progression of simpler words to more complex. Start with the word bed. We're just going to look at these together. So again, this student could read all of these words, but then when asked to spell it, she was able to spell, and we'll go down, bed, ship, when, lump, float, train, all accurately. The next word, what word is that? It's
Do
go
you want
for
me
it,
to
Lori.
answer?
Yeah, go for it.
Place.
You got it. Very good. Place, totally phonetically plausible. Then drive. Then we have bright. Again, phonetically like that's great. And now you're starting to see, okay, I'm seeing some full alphabetic representations here. I'll go a little bit faster. We've got shopping, that works. Spoil, what a great use of the OY, great use of it. We have serving, then chewed, CHOOD, totally plausible. The next one is carries, great use of that Y. She knows that Y can make that I sound. We've got marched, shower, bottle, favor. Doesn't that's like really how favor sounds. Now the P what oh ripen. Then we have PLEGER. Does anyone want to try that? It's a really tricky one. Think about what a G, this student learned that a G makes the J sound in front of an E, I, or Y. So you could sound this out, pleasure. She phonetically represented the word pleasure using what she knows. That totally works if you just learn that G says J, right? And it's really what we hear in pleasure is a J, but she gave it a J. Okay. And then we go all the way up to the top. It's hard to read, but the FOCHENET. She's missing one sound here, but the word is fortunate. Let me read it again while you look at it. Fortunate. It's a great spelling. It's a great spelling. And what we use this as an example, again, to represent that tension, to give a great example of a student who's a bit stuck in the full alphabetic. Even though her reading has moved on, she's stuck spelling at that phase, and she needs very explicit, systematic review level instruction on when and why we use certain phonetic elements in spellings. What she's got down is she knows how to segment words into phonemes in a phenomenal way. She knows a lot of phonetic concepts. She threw everything out there. That G, that OY, she's got the CH, she's got all the bossy E's going on. She threw it all out there, but she hasn't received enough instruction on when and why you use OY versus OI. And I could go on. So I get very passionate about the spelling instructions, but so forgive me. Here's another example. This is a wonderful story. So, and now we're going from a student who is able to read again in the consolidated, seems to be a consolidated reader. But when the student went to write, the spellings were again in the full alphabetic phase. And this story at the top, you see the title. This is The Nightmare, right? And just a great story. So I can read this, Laura. You can read it with me if you want. It's such a good one. I'll read it with you. This
is a
is a
story
story
about
about
a
a
police
good
officer,
officer, a dog,
a dog, and
and
lots
lots of
of other things.
excellent.
There
There
was
was
a
a
dog
dog
on
on
somebody's
somebody's
yard
yard
without
without
a
a
leash.
leash. The
The
person
person from
from
the
the
home
home
came
came out
out and
and
starting
starting
yelling
yelling to
to the
the
owner.
owner.
Then
Then the
the police
police
came.
came. Great.
Then
Then
the
the
dog
dog
opened
opened
the
the
fire
fire
hydrant
hydrant. Exactly. And
and
and I'm going to give this one to you, and it's going to make perfect sense. Ruined.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's
Ruined.
good. The car.
Yep.
The
The
police
police
got
got mad.
mad. The
The
teacher
teacher, yeah, was,
was surprised
yep,
and
and
mad
mad
because
because
her
her
car
car
got
got
ruined.
ruined. Yes, well,
Thanks
Lord,
for
that was
helping me.
amazing. Oh, that was so good. First time you ever saw it. And once I gave you ruined, you were like, oh, yes, that totally works.
Yeah.
And this is a nightmare, right? The story is called The Nightmare. This is a nightmare, but
Yes.
not because of the spelling, because as a teacher, your car just got ruined.
Yeah.
So this is such good writing. Like
Mhm.
those of us who've worked with older students on the writing, this has a beginning, a middle, and end. The title maps to what goes on in the story. There's
Yeah.
drama, there's characters, there's a dog without a leash in all of this. What
Yes.
what we know in research though is when you randomly assign student writing and you take students' name off it, students with weak handwriting and poor spelling are actually graded more harshly, even if their content is stronger than students that have strong spelling and strong handwriting skills. And so that breaks my heart for this student, right? This is a great story
Yeah.
that was written. Okay, so just wanted to give that other example around, this what words have been retained in memory and can be accurately represented in spelling. So to bring it back just in the last 5 minutes to this book that I wrote with my colleague Molly called Making Words Stick. What we did is we know this research, we know these theories, and our goal in writing the book was not only to translate Aries research on orthographic mapping and phase theory, but also to shed more light on these excellent research briefs that your tax dollars have paid for. So both of these guides are available free through the Institute of Educational Sciences, and they summarize the research and provide practical examples. Problem is that nobody uses them. And everyone, we need to update them with new activities that work for our field, but they're great. And we know many of the people that wrote those. What all of the research shows is it's the usual suspects. If you want words to stick in memory, you have to develop phonemic awareness skills. You have to teach students how to decode and analyze word parts. For multisyllabic words, you have to build students' decoding skills in order to get to the ability to break down these multisyllabic words. And you have to provide fruitful, purposeful fluency building activities. Well, how did we do that? So, what Molly and I put forth was a 4-part protocol that's in the book, Making Words Stick. Based on what we know about the research, this protocol does not need to be used for every word that you encounter. Students do not need that. That's also not possible. However, the focus for the protocol is on a phonetic pattern. Maybe it's IGH. When you're learning a new phonetic pattern, you would use this 4-step protocol. You would have a target word that is the exemplar for this. And then when you get into search and stick, you're transferring the learning of that phonetic element to multiple other words that also have IGH. We also recognize that for some students, they need this protocol, as I mentioned before, around exposures, and for other students, they may not. But if you work with any striving readers, we highly recommend it. So the protocol is exactly as it sounds. When you see the first step is a quick, you see the word, you say the word to make that phonological representation, but you are both seeing the word and hearing the word at the same time. Step 2 is the analysis of the grapheme phoneme correspondences by doing that explicit letter sound mapping. The third step is when we're getting to that meaning part of the theory of orthographic mapping. You're getting into the usage of the words. And for search and stick, part 4 is we're going into practice. So we're getting into that automatic word recognition where we're transferring that phonetic element skill to other words, and we're just trying to build automaticity with the word that was the target word and others. So what we did is we took that protocol, you see it across the top. Those are the 4 steps. But we know teachers need a lot of activities in order to keep things snappy, right? So for kindergarten and first grade, we challenged ourselves to come up with as many see and say activities as we thought was reasonable, as many segment and spell. And you see for each part of the protocol, there's a menu of options based on the grade level. If we zoom in here to, let's see what slide. This is the kindergarten and first grade menu. So for this grade level, what you would do is, let's say for week 1, you're going to stick with see it, say it, sing it. That's what you're going to do every day for the see and say part of the protocol. And then you're going to do march it, spell it. So you go from that to that. Then for study and suss out, you would do act it out, and then you would do hunt for it. And there's activities in the back of the book that represent each one of these. So we don't think you should change up the protocol unless you're doing one-on-one tutoring and you have time. As a teacher, you might set up a center that week where you select those options from the menu and you build out the protocol that week with those activities, and then you change up the activities the next week. We're going to give you the example. Let me just move that. I'm going to walk through this really quickly with the word stick. So for the stick, we're working on that CK phonetic element. So simple as can be, you see the word, they chorally repeat the word is stick, pick up your phone. So we were using Tubaloo phones when we were doing this, and say the word stick into your phone. That's it. We move on to segment and spell. You've seen now Conan boxes, these double-decker forms. I use this in a lot of my intervention work. Now we're going to break stick up into its phonemes. So we're counting the phonemes. We're moving the phoneme chips into the gray, and then we're mapping it to the letters in the white. And here's an example of a multisyllabic word. This is a teacher who is using our protocol and sent this back to us. She was doing it with the word government. So we were doing it with stick. Just want to give you this example. They said the word and saw the word. She then broke it into syllables. You see the boxes for the syllables? She then broke it into sounds. And then you see meant underneath it. That's how they broke this up. And then they wrote the word government underneath it. So that was their step 2. Then we move into study and suss out. So there's multiple meanings of that we just I went over to the word government to give you the multisyllabic example, but we're going to go back to the word stick. So there's multiple meanings of the word stick. So we would generate all of these different characteristics of the word stick, and we would use it in context. So we use sticks to start a fire. The glue made things stick together. Grab your stick and let's play hockey. So you're going to use the word, you would show visual examples of all of these different popsicle stick. You would give all of these examples and you would use them in a sentence. In the book for this part, we also have these different word part organizers that you can use that get into all of the morphological relationships of stick, sticky, sticking, stuck. So we're giving you those templates as well. One important part about the third part when you're doing the meaning, the study and suss out, is we've got all of these function words. And these function words can be tricky. Function words are auxiliary words. They're words that really don't have content meaning. The word are, was, has, like how do you define those words? Well, the only way to define those words is to use the surrounding words for their meaning. So this is particularly, you really should not be teaching function words in isolation. You have to use them in a sentence. So we also give in the book for study and suss out, if you're teaching function words, we give examples of these closed passage readings where you're blocking out these function words, and then the student is writing in these words for that part of the protocol. Finally, search and stick. So this is where you're going to connect the word and its phonetic element to decodable text, right? So this is where, and we're writing a follow-up to this book where there's going to be a lot of decodable text options for you to use. And you might lead students on a word hunt where they're searching for words with that similar pattern, that CK ending. You might have students read and underline those words, and then they would go through and read the decodable text after they've done the search and stick aspect of the lesson. So for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap it up here with a summary just to say in the book, we lay out this protocol. We give you this menu of options, and the back of the book is full of all of the activity sheets that we hope are helpful for you all. And we want to just remind you the beginning of the book talks about what the theory of orthographic mapping is, how it's related to phase theory, this critical connection between spelling and reading, and then how to use the protocol to support all readers, but particularly striving readers. On that note, Lori, I will pass it back to you and just say thank you to everyone in Utah for having
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Like
me.
you just packed it
Thanks.
all in so well. So good job. Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again.
Great.
So thank you, thank you. If you would like to know more about Dr. Smiles, I always say
I love
Smiles,
that.
sorry. Dr. Miles, you can connect with her on Instagram here, LinkedIn, Facebook. So many good things. And we want to, of course, encourage you to purchase her book. It is such a wealth of information and so helpful. I'm not in the classroom right now, but I am teaching all the teachers, and we have just loved your book. So it's been such a wealth of information for us as well. So thank you all for coming tonight. We will reconvene in a couple of weeks. So I think it's May 5th. We have Dr. Nancy Walker coming. So please join us again for that. And we will send out recordings so that you can listen to this again if you'd like. I could listen to you every day, Dr. Miles. You've got so many good tidbits and good information for us. So thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
And we will say good night. Have a great rest of your night, and thanks for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Katie, I do have a question for you. Um, when everyone's gone.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That was so good.
Oh,
Um, yes, I that was magic. And that I feel like that was
good.
the magic for my son who's dyslexic. Like
Oh,
he absolutely needed that mapping piece. And I didn't know what mapping was. And I'm like, I'm the literacy specialist for his teacher. I should know, how to help this kid know how to map. Anyway, I would love to use some of your ideas. I am presenting at, we have a May webinar for WGU, and it's for pre-service teachers. You are welcome to come. You're welcome to bring all your students. I'm
oh,
happy
fun.
to give you the information, or I can just throw it in the chat. I don't know what would be. I've got your email, so I can just email it to you.
Yeah, shoot me an email. That's great.
It's May 20th, and we've got Dr. Moats, we've got Pam Kastner, we've got
Oh,
Dr. Lindstone. I always call her Doctor because she's so brilliant.
so
And then
brilliant. Oh,
anyway, Joan Sedita's coming, and we're
oh,
just diving into all of this and how do we help our pre-service teachers. So it's kind of like a plain
mm,
talk for pre-service teachers. So, or a reading league or whatever. So
that's amazing. That's
yeah,
absolutely fantastic.
yeah. So it's going to be recorded. You can just register. If you can't make it the whole day, you can just get the recording and listen to it whenever you want. But I'll email you the information and the link to sign up. But
Please do.
I'd love for you to join us, and I would love to
Oh,
share some of your ideas. I'll share your book too, because I'm talking about the orthographic
thanks.
mapping section. So
Oh, great. Oh, good, good.
I
Oh,
should
yes.
have just had you come, but I already,
Ah, no
I'm
worries. No
like,
worries. I'm happy to support you in any way. I'm happy to join, and you do you, and you're going to be great. You don't need me. You don't need me. You're going to be wonderful.
well, I am going to share your book. So I just was
Good.
wondering if I can share some of your ideas that you shared tonight. I think that'd be
I,
helpful in what
of
I'm
course,
presenting.
absolutely. And we always just say to people, and I know you would, you just like cite the book and say, like, this comes from their book and you recommend it, and all good stuff. We're all in
Free
it to begin with.
advertising for you, right?
It's great. I so appreciate it.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
Katie,
Okay.
I